Welcome back to Uncaged Sports Talk. Here on this episode, we are going to talk about what just happened on Tuesday night. The Phillies. The Phillies. Sick. I'm sick to my stomach. I was disappointed. I've never experienced a disappointment like that in my life as a Philly sports fan, and that's saying something, considering Philly sports fans are pessimistic. They've gone through a lot of hell and back throughout the years. This was my first true Philly sports heartbreak, in my opinion. I'll get into that more later. I do want to say before breaking down the game and breaking down the series, because last time we had this episode, I was not able to talk, and the Phillies were up 2-0 at that point. We all thought they were going to the World Series. The whole world thought they were going to the World Series at that point. But before I get into that topic, I want to let everyone know that I was supposed to have 2008 World Series champion Kyle Kendrick on this episode, but he is not feeling well. Prayers go out to him. Hopefully, he starts feeling better next weekend. We said we're going to try to reschedule for next week sometime. Hopefully, we can get the episode out at the same time as usual next Thursday with 2008 World Series champion KK38 Kyle Kendrick, which would be really exciting to have him on, talk about this series, talk about what went wrong for the Phillies, see where he lies, and some of his memories from throughout the '07 to 11 years that the Phillies kept making the playoffs. Because this team, the last 2 years, has made some really good memories, but it's still just sickening knowing that it just ended just like that. But without further ado, we're just gonna jump right into it, rip the band-aid off, per se. That game on Tuesday night, last night at the time I'm recording this, sickening. I was there at the game when the Diamondbacks won. I sat there because I wanted to wait for the traffic to clear out because I'm driving a new work van. I'm driving a work van, which I'm still getting used to, so I didn't want to have to fight through traffic. So I sat there, one of the few people just sitting there watching the Diamondbacks celebrate on the Phillies field. They planted the Diamondbacks flag on the Phillies field. They were all celebrating. Sickening, sickening, sickening. Something that me sitting there almost made me paralyzed by the shock. I almost should have just left because when I was just sitting there at a certain point, felt like I didn't even want to get up to move. It got to that point. It got to that point where I didn't even really want to move just because I was shocked. I was just had no energy to do anything just because of pure shock of losing to the Arizona freaking Diamondbacks. You should not have lost to the Diamondbacks. It was just pure shock. I'm still in shock. As you guys can tell, anger might be starting to set in by the end of this. You might see some of the anger come out. But I'm going through the 5 stages of grief. Big time. Going through the 5 stages of grief big time because of how much I loved and still love this Phillies team. It's going to take a lot to get back to truly loving this Phillies team. But over these last 2 years, a city has fallen back in love with this Philadelphia Phillies team. It's been a baseball is dead in Philadelphia from 2012 to 2021, and it reignited in October of 2022 and brought back a fan base and an entirely new generation of fans to Citizens Bank Park. And that fans, it's for those fans, including me, our hearts were just ripped out again. Still love this team, proud of the team, but extremely, extremely disappointed in how the series ended. They should have wiped the floor with the Diamondbacks. The Arizona Diamondbacks, a team that had their fan base selling tickets for $18 to an NLCS Game 3. I don't think their tickets touched $100 for Game 4 and 5. That's sickening. This is gonna be the least watched World Series of all time when the ratings come out. The Arizona Diamondbacks versus the Texas Rangers. Granted, Texas is in a large market. They're in Arlington, in the shadow of Jerry World. But it's just sickening that they lost to the Arizona Diamondbacks. Like, I don't know what to say about it. I do know what to say about it. We're gonna get into some reasons why. Try to at least, because I haven't heard one person be able to truly explain why. But I'll talk some about the game, about leading up to game 7, and then I'll talk about game 7. Started out 2-0 last week when Dan was a substitute host for me last week. At that, even before the series, my prediction for the series was Phillies 5 or Phillies in 5. Started up 2-0. I predicted them to lose game 3. That happened. So I was like, okay, shit happens. It happens. They'll right the ship and they'll win the next 2. And like Garrett Stubbs said, I hate him for what he said. Not hate him, hate's a strong word, but he should never have said that. You're talking way too soon as an athlete. You're looking past a team, basically. But like he said, I thought they were gonna go jump in that pool. I didn't like the comment at the time. I don't like it now, but I still agreed with them. I thought they were gonna go jump in that pool in Arizona after Game 5. I thought they were gonna win Game 5 and go to the World Series for the second straight year. So you start up 2-0. I'm definitely thinking they're gonna win in 5. You lose Game 3, okay, like I predicted. Kimbrel blew it, but you only scored 1 run. And that was on a wild pitch, so no, I don't really blame Kimbrel as much as other people have for that game. The next game is where I blame Kimbrel and Rob Thompson. Rob pulled Christopher Sanchez early. People are saying too early, but at the time, me and my dad both were sitting there saying, yeah, got to get him out of there. Didn't like how the game was set up with Christopher Sanchez in there. So they got him out early. So we were like, okay, good. Just got to manage the bullpen, get through the bullpen. You knew Craig Kimbrel will come in at a certain time. I expected it earlier in the game, so not a high leverage situation. But then got to the 8th inning. Phillies leading 5-3. What does Rob Thompson do? For the second straight night, the definition of insanity. Trying the same thing over and over again. He brings out Craig Kimbrel, leading 5-3. When he said his struggles down the stretch, he was good earlier in the season, really good earlier in the season. He was perfect, I think, like 29 for 29 in the first half, was an all-star. But it went downhill south for Craig in the second half of the season, as it did in Game 4 in Arizona, leading 5-3 after Kirkern was the one who gave up one of the runs to make it 5-3. Kimbrel blew a second straight game. Just straight up blew a second straight game. Gave up the 2 runs. In came Alvarado. And Alvarado let in the last runner for Kimbrel, which was Kimbrel's runner. So Kimbrel's charged for 3 runs given up. 3 earned runs given up. 2 games back to back, Craig Kimbrel blew. Because Rob Thompson trusted his guys too much in that situation. You trusted Craig Kimbrel too much. He should not have been put in a high leverage situation in the NLC in back-to-back nights. Everyone knew he was cooked after the one. Once he came in, people were pulling their hair. It was just too stressful. Alec Thomas, props to him. He deserves it. Good props to the Diamondbacks. I'll say that too. Props to the entire Diamondbacks team. They deserve it. They didn't choke. The Phillies choked. Flat out choked. A choke job. Might need to do a Heimlich maneuver episode next week. Show people how to stop people from choking because of how bad the Phillies choked. But then you lose game 4. That's where you lost the series ultimately. You had it won. You had game 4 won in the palm of your hands, and you lost. So then comes game 5. Wheeler rights the ship, gets the Phillies back up 3-2. You go up 3-2, coming back to South Philly at the bank, Citizens Bank Park. 3-2 lead. Just need to win one in Philly. All right, we're good. We're going back. We're going back to the World Series. That was the sentiment around town. That was a sentiment I had. I was like, we're going back to the World Series. Prepare the polls. If we don't win game 6, so be it. We'll win game 7. They're not winning 2 straight in Philadelphia. I know it happened last year in the World Series, but Astros were a historic team. Nothing taken away from the Astros there. Astros were a historic team. I don't blame the Phillies for that either. In game 6, the bats didn't show up. You come back home, the bats didn't show up for the second game in the series. Only 1 run in game 6 at home. Aaron Nola, I don't blame him. Might suck if he leaves. Might suck if he's no longer a Philly after this postseason. But I do not blame him. Your offense only got you 1 run against Merrill Kelly, who you lit up in game 2 of the series. You had 10 runs that game in game 2, and your offense fell flat. And then last night, culmination of the entire series. A culmination of an entire season. That silence that I just had for a second just shows like my thoughts exactly. Like I don't know what to feel right now. The anger's starting to set in. That game last night that I was at when I was there. So Tuesday night when I'm recording this, so many missed chances. So many times I turn to the person I'm there with saying, "Oh, the pitch is going to be low. The pitch is going to be in the dirt." I said that a lot for Trey Turner and Castellanos. I was like, the pitch is going to be in the dirt. He agreed. The whole stadium knew it. The whole world knew it. Everyone except Trey would. There wasn't a bat specifically where it was a big situation. I believe there was runners on. Trey Turner swung at 2 pitches back to back that looked like, from my view, it was in the same exact spot. Back to back, swung at 2 of the same pitches that looked like they were in the dirt. And he still swung at them back to back. Disgusting that was. And then Castellanos. Castellanos, just pitiful this series. How do you only have 1 hit in entire series? This series was worse than anything he had in the playoffs last year. How do you only have 1 hit in an entire series? 7 games. You only have 1 hit. That's unheard of. Especially with how hot he was the last series. 2 home runs back-to-back days against the Braves. And then he hits a home run in the first game of this series. Disgusting. Like, they went ice cold at the worst possible time. No other ways really to put it. They were Harper, Turner, Castellanos. 0 for 23 in the last 2 games of the series at home. 0 for 23. And I don't blame Harper, by the way. Harper was getting pitched around. he started to press, which I do blame him for in that regard a little, but I don't blame him for truly losing the series. There's a lot of blame to go around, but he's lower on the list. Like, they were pitching around him, and boom, made him regret it this time around. He wound up hitting a home run. He was like, okay, you're not pitching around Harper tonight. But just disappointing in Harper not coming up just short, literally and figuratively. By literally, he hit 2 balls, one off the bat early. I forget what inning, but it looked like it might go. But it was just a pop up to center field. He missed that one. And then the next one that he hit, 7th inning, 2 runners on, chance to take the lead and have a bedlam at the bank 2.0, came up just short at the warning track, flies out at the warning track. I saw a tweet by Jason Stark of The Athletic. Jason Stark said, Bryce Harper put 60 balls in the play, hit 60 balls that at 107 miles per hour or greater throughout the season. And he batted 763 with 15 home runs anytime he hit a ball 107 miles an hour or better. And just was less than inches, less than an inch, less than a half inch shy of hitting the ball right where he needs to on the barrel and making it a 5-4 ball game and potentially sending the Phillies to the World Series. I thought he was going to do it again. I was praying. I wanted it to come through, but once that happened, I started losing hope. And all series long, as fans, I know we were all looking right past the Arizona Diamondbacks, which as fans you can do it, but Garrett Stubbs and the rest of the team, I think they were too, which you're not supposed to do that. I do have a theory, though. I will ask Kyle his thoughts on the theory next week if he is on here. But my theory for why the bats went so cold so quick, I'm going to show a clip of Nick Castellanos after I say the theory, and I'll say why as well. Like, he might confirm it for you, or you might still disagree. But my theory is that the lighting, and I'm not using this as an excuse. If it would be a pitiful excuse. You shouldn't be pressing as a baseball player no matter what. Because that's the worst thing you can do. When you're playing tight, you play worse as a baseball player. Especially in Major League. If you play loose, you're on top of your game usually. But that stadium out in Arizona, Chase Field, the lighting there was pitiful. The lighting for Major League Baseball stadium, it was dark, dim, gray. It looked gray on the broadcast. The lighting there sucked for Major League Baseball stadium and for sporting venue. Like, that place should not be hosting baseball games until they get better lighting. MLB has to have standards with that, but that's neither here or there. I think because of the lighting, I think people like Castellanos and the rest of the team for a good bit of it weren't seeing the ball as well in the lighting. So then they started pressing because they weren't able to see the ball well. So they were pressing, just trying to get lucky, just trying to make something happen. And it just spilled and spilled and spilled into the rest of the series because their approaches were straight up horrible and putrid. I'm gonna show Castellanos explanation for him going cold, and you guys can agree or disagree, but this is the reason why I think that the bats went cold. The lighting there, and they just went cold in Arizona. It happened when they went to Arizona, and then I think they started pressing afterwards. But here's Nick Castellanos.
It's a frustrating way for the season to end.
Because you guys were up 2-0, because you guys had the last two games.
I think just because the potential of this team is so much greater than going home before the World Series. You know, last year when we lost Game 6, I think obviously we're disappointed because we didn't win the whole thing, but there was a lot of like, all right, well, we got here. You know, like now we can build off of that. So knowing how we feel about this team, and we came up short from what we did the year previous, I mean, it's a disgusting feeling, honestly.
You feel like that fourth inning was the chance for you guys to really kind of take control of this game? It was 2-1 because of the one out, and you guys couldn't tackle on there.
I think it was first and third, and I was up with one out, and then Marsh walked to make it bases loaded.
Right.
For sure. And I had a terrible at bat. Me wanting too much to get the runner in instead of just doing. Seeing what the pitcher was going to give me first, and that's on me.
For you, and you were, a week ago you were as hot as could be, and then it just seemed like it turned on a dime. Did it feel like that way for you, where you just feel like you could hit anything, and then all of a sudden just couldn't buy a hit?
I think that I felt great until going to Arizona, and then once I went to Arizona, like I just felt like I was grinding to see the ball, to see the pitches, and it's terrible, man. It's a terrible feeling. To just feel like you're locked in and be in a zone like that, and then have it fade away at the wrong time.
So Nick Castellanos, what he said at the end of that video, felt like he was locked in. He was seeing the ball well until they went to Arizona, and then he had to grind to see the ball. He kept grinding. He had to grind through it. And by the time he realized he couldn't hit the ball out there, started pressing. And I believe the entire team did that, which you should not press ever in baseball. It's literally a death sentence if you're pressing, basically. Baseball, you got to play loose, uncomfortable. It's just disgusting. I think the Phillies just flat out overlooked a team that they should have wiped the floor with. You should have beaten them in 5 and went to back-to-back World Series appearances. Jack Fritz on the radio made a good analogy. He said with this game, them losing is almost like if you got dumped by a girlfriend. That's the feeling that you get, that you have from the Phillies losing that game. It's like getting dumped by a girlfriend. I don't have a girlfriend right now, but it's just a sickening feeling. Knowing that they were that close to back-to-back NL pennants, and they came up just short. And hard not to believe that they were probably the best team remaining at the 4 in the championship series. But just they came up short. They overlooked the Diamondbacks, and they squandered opportunity after opportunity and lost the series to the Arizona freaking Diamondbacks. They should not have lost. I will say one thing, though. I will pivot and talk about what makes it hard for moments like this. What makes it hard to move after moments like this, why you get invested, why you get upset after moments like this. And I've been depressed all day long. And some people have been asking why, and I said I would explain it on the podcast. The reason why is because you get so invested, you fall in love with the team because the connection that they had to the fan base They reignited a love for baseball. I mean, when I was younger, when I was 8 years old, when I was 10 years old, the teams with Rollins, Howard, Kendrick, Hamels, all them, Holiday. I loved baseball. Baseball was my favorite sport then. Granted, football took over eventually, but baseball was my favorite sport growing up. And then it was dead for 10 years. Had no reason to really watch baseball games. I followed the Phillies, but it was dead for 10 years. Then last year, they reignited it. They got to the World Series. I was proud of the team, the way it ended. At least you lost to a historic team. This series, you were a win away from going back to the World Series and potentially, very likely, if you get back to the World Series, winning it all this year and having a parade and this team being immortalized, this team being loved forever by this fan base, by the city, and being immortalized by the city of Philadelphia. They would, as former Flyers, late great head coach that won their Stanley Cups with them, said, Freddie Shiro, win today, walk together tomorrow forever. Or I may have said that backwards, but walk tomorrow or walk together forever. Win today, walk together forever. And they would have walked together with an entire city forever if they won a world championship, which they should have been able to do with this team. They came up short and they choked. An ultimate Philly choke job. Biggest of my lifetime. You can probably hear it in my voice as I'm trying to talk through this. It's the fact you get so invested and they pull the rug out from under you, rip it right out from under you. Any excitement you had gone like that in an instant. And the season's over. Next year, it's not going to be the same. That's what makes it hurt even more. Next year, it's not going to be the same as it has been the last 2 years. The last 2 years has just been a fun ride. A fun ride up until now. Next year, it's just going to be business. You're not going to have the dancing on my own next year. You're not going to have the partying really next year. It's going to be business to get to the World Series and win it. If they don't, it's a disappointment and you start running out of time. Because the more you keep having deep postseason runs, the more your arms get tired and pitching wise, and the more your teams start to fall apart sooner rather than later. The Astros are an exception. The Dodgers are an exception. The Dodgers don't even really go deep, so the Astros are the main exception to the rule. But without further ado, I will get into Luke's list this week, which is not an NFL power ranking. I'm neglecting football this week. I will hopefully get back to that next week at some point. But Luke's list this week, the worst Philly sports losses in my lifetime. Starting with number 5, Eagles Super Bowl 57 loss. This loss, or the Eagles Super Bowl 57 loss, hurt, but the fact I got to be there eased the pain. It eased the pain. It hurt knowing that Jalen Hurts didn't get it. It was sick feeling knowing how it ended. But I was still very proud of that team. And I was proud that I got to be there with my dad. Lifetime memories created with my dad at Super Bowl 57. So that eased the pain of that loss. Coming in at number 4 is Sixers versus Raptors. Game 7, 2019. I just have to say one name, and everyone will know exactly why. Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard drained a 3-point shot that felt like it was bouncing forever after Jimmy Butler went down and tied the game up. Looked like it was going to go to overtime, and Kawhi Leonard hit a 3 to win the game and go on to the Eastern Conference Final and eventually win the NBA championship. That was probably Joel Embiid's best chance to win an NBA title as a Sixer. And at the time, he felt like whoever won that series was going to win the NBA championship. At least that's how I felt as a Sixers fan. And you felt like that this year with the Phillies and the Braves series. You felt like whoever won the series was going to win the World Series this year. That's another thing. How do you beat the Braves, yet you lose to the Arizona Diamondbacks? You beat a 104-win Braves team, 107-win Braves team, yet you lose to the Arizona freaking Diamondbacks, an 84-win team. You should have wiped the floor with this team. You beat the Braves in 4 games, 3-1. And you couldn't get up 3-1 on the Diamondbacks? You had your chance and you blew it. Craig Kimbrell, Rob Thompson, you blew that chance to go up 3-1. You were up 2-0. You blew that chance to go up 3-0. Okay, that's fine. You have a chance to go up 3-1. That's a death sentence to most teams. You blew that chance. You went up 3-2, and you blew that. You lost 2 straight in Philly. Sorry for ranting again. Just came back out on me again. The disappointment in the team came back out. But both series, the Phillies and Braves this year, I thought one was going to go to the World Series. And the Sixers versus Raptors in 2018-19, I thought the winner was going to the NBA championship and winning it. And it happened that year. Just had our hearts ripped out with a Kawhi bounce that went in. Coming in at number 3 is the Phillies World Series loss in 2022. I touched on that one already. Them losing last year didn't hurt as bad, nearly as bad as this year, nearly as bad as the number 2. It hurt at first because the finality of it. You were like, they just lost. They just lost the World Series. They were up 2-1. I was at game 3 of the World Series when they went up 2-1. You left the building that night thinking they were going to win the World Series. But the fact they lost, granted to the Astros, still a historic team, but when they lost, you're just like, did that really just happen? You're just sitting there thinking to yourself, that really just happened. The season's over. It was a very exciting ride, and it just hurt the finality that their season was over and it didn't end how you wanted it to. But you were still very proud of them because they were supposed to lose. The expectation, they greatly exceeded expectations last year, which made that not higher on this list. Before I get into number 2 and number 1, I want to let you all know to head and visit my friend Dan the Man Stanley at Sheridan Nissan, where they will hook you up with a brand new car or used car. Just let them know Luke Saranka and Uncaged Sports Talk sent you. Coming in at number 2 is the Eagles versus Saints 2018-2019 season. The Alshon Jeffrey drop after Nick Foles took the Eagles on another miracle run. You had the double doink the week before. You had the Saints kicker miss a field goal that would have ended that game. And then the Eagles started driving right before the 2-minute warning. You thought they were going back to the to the Super Bowl. Not the Super Bowl, my bad. To the NFC Championship game. And I think they would have went back to the Super Bowl because they would have had to beat the Rams twice. Or they would have had to beat the Rams, which they had already beaten them that season and the year before. But right around the 2-minute warning, Eagles decide to run an extra play instead of letting it go to the 2-minute warning. Nick Foles throws it to Alshon Jeffrey, someone who was all reliable then too. Someone who you knew if it was thrown to him, he was going to catch it. No, he didn't that time. Went right through his hands, picked off by Marshawn Lattimore, and the Eagles' magic ran out that night. And the Saints moved on to the next round, and the rest was history. The Saints wound up losing to the Rams, but with the controversial pass interference call. But the Eagles came up very short that night, and that night hurt a lot because it was just who's going to be back next year was the question. Who's going to be here? Who's not going to be here? Like at that point, Brandon Graham was in a contract year. You thought there was going to be a lot of changes to the team, but there wasn't. And that's why the loss isn't number one. Thought that loss might have been an end of an era almost. But that's why the loss isn't number one. Number one isn't because the loss is an end of an era. Number one is because it's the end of a 2-year little run where it was just pure love for a baseball team that had not had any success in a 10-year span, brought back interest to the sport of baseball for people like myself and other Philly sports fans. Phillies NLCS Game 7 2023. And I've gone over most of the reasons for that. Just very disappointing. It's about expectations. That's the main reason. You were expected to wipe the floor. You were expected to not let the Diamondbacks get any breathing room and just roll right to the World Series to play the Astros in a rematch or the Rangers for the ultimate Dallas week. The whole Philly area expected this series to be a breeze. If you didn't, you were lying to yourself. And I guess even the Phillies thought they expected it to be a breeze and looked right past them. And just feels like it's not going to be the same next year. Even if they're really good, even if they go and win a division. Just doesn't feel like it's going to be the same next year because you only have one goal. Even though you're supposed to enjoy the ride, that's going to be very hard next year with them letting you down this year, thinking this was the year for them. This was my first true experience of a Philly sports heartbreak. Feels like a gut punch right now. Feels like I got punched in the gut and I don't know what to do. Just like the Phillies got punched in the face in Game 6 and didn't know how to respond in Game 7. Just feels like a slap in the face almost with how the series ended. Very disappointing. Very disappointing end to the season. But we'll come back to the Phillies in February, March, come April. Hopefully, I'm in a better mood about the Phillies. I'll still probably despise that series for the rest of my life. It's one of those series where you hate it for the rest of your life. Like, yeah, I heard Joe DeCamara talking about 1993, the Phillies blowing that against the Blue Jays, Mitch Williams, similar to Craig Kimbrell this year. I've heard a lot of the Eagles versus Bucks 0-2 comparisons at the last game at the Vet. Just I've heard a lot of stuff like that the last few days or the last day. It's one of those losses that scars you as a fan that you hold with you forever. And you're like, how did they lose that? And you're going to hold it with you until they can get over the hump. Whenever that is, whether it's next year or 25 years from now, you're going to hold it with you until they get over the hump. And when they do eventually get over the hump, whenever that is, the losses like those on Luke's list this week make it that much sweeter when they eventually get over the hump. So hopefully this year's loss in Game 7 If they do somehow win it next year, if they win it the following year, whenever they win it, that'll make it that much more sweeter. This was a difficult episode to get through. Needed to vent. It probably will help by the time I go to bed. But it was good to vent, get some stuff off my chest where people can hear it. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Uncaged Sports Talk. Tune in next week. Hopefully we can get Kyle Kendrick on next week. If not, we'll have some friends on. Maybe we'll do 2 episodes next week. I'm not sure yet. But thanks for tuning into this episode of Uncaged Sports Talk. And for the end of a wild ride for the Phillies. Salute to the Phillies. Thank you. Is all I get. I'll say that. Thank you to the Phillies for the last 2 years and bringing baseball back to relevance in Philadelphia. I'm proud as a Phillies fan, but it's also very disappointing at the same time. Tune in next week. Remember to like, follow, and comment on all of our platforms. It is greatly appreciated.